curriculum that is a one-size-fits-all for Africa, actually, from Europe.
Right.
For Africa or for Sadc from the East. We need to tailor-make things that actually suit us, that speaks to who we are, so that we are able to transform our situation.
Mwachande ndogara kuchegutu tikuhodhawo kuku kurima senda vanotidzidzisa maitirikiro acho kuti dzinyatsoita zvakanaka munoita sei, tinotenga chikafu ikoko, madhiringati vanotipa, mafidha, mishonga yacho zvese. Ndiri kufara nokuti dzacho aiwa dziri kukura zvakanaka, dzakanaka, aiwa zvakarongeka, vari kutibetsera chaizvo kurima senda. Kurima kune mari zveshuwa, tiri kutozvionera tega.
Positions develop a collective ideology that one culture amongst all the youth can embrace going forward?
Well, even in our diverse, at one point, if you go back into research, you would realize that when one researcher, then Lord Macleod from the West came and visited Africa, before the partitioning of Africa, there was no beggar in Africa. Neither was there a jail. There was no this whole thing of saying we don't know where to put street kids. Families who knew how to incubate, knew how to exist within and among each other. We had a culture, we had a way of embracing each other. So definitely I think we can still do something. We can celebrate diversity than pointing to it as a negative.
Right.
Yes.
Now, on that particular note there, we do implore you once again to be part of the conversation. Keep sending us your questions, comments, and your contributions on our social media platform at ZBC News Online. It's a special live current affairs broadcast of the 44th Sadak Summit, where heads of state will be arriving at the Robert Gabriel Mugabe International Airport during the course of the day. Quite a few arrived yesterday too. And this all, of course, culminating to tomorrow, where His Excellency the President, Comrade Dr. Emerson Dambudzo Mnangagwa, will be taking on the chairmanship of the Sadc collective. Now, we'll also be looking at a few more extensive engagements that have been taking place, Sadc Connect being one of those. Let's have a look.
Zimbabwe is this August hosting the 44th Sadak Summit of Heads of State and Government, during which President Emerson Mnangagwa will be assuming the chairmanship of the regional bloc. As we speak, the Sadak Industrialization Week is underway in the capital, Harare, and captains of industry are meeting, exchanging notes on ways to develop the industry in the regional bloc, as well as the upliftment of the Sadak region as a whole. To discuss these issues and more, we have in the studio political analyst Mr. Elton Ziki, as well as economic analyst Mr. Farai Zijo. I'm Justin Matlatla, and this is Sadak Connect. Gentlemen, welcome to the program. I'll start with Mr. Zijo.
Thank you.
The Sadak Industrialization Week is underway as we speak. Tell us, what are you expecting as tangible outcomes from this week?
Thank you, Justin. This exercise, if I can call it that, or this event, is something that is welcome for anyone in Sadc who is interested in industrialization. It is welcome. The expectation, of course, is that it will produce what I believe should be tangible results. And what are tangible results? At the end of it, we are looking at what business deals have been made. Is there a takeaway by the industrialists that are going to be attending? Is there a takeaway even by all the other interested parties that are going to be taking part in this event? How can we measure, these benefits? In fact, in my own understanding or my own belief, we should be coming up with some kind of a map whereby we'll be saying, have we achieved this? Have we achieved this? Have we achieved that? Something that we can relate to. Anyone looking at the event which took place in Zimbabwe will be able to say, yes, when we met in Zimbabwe, these were the products of that meeting, not just a talk shop, not just an event where we come. You know, when we discuss ideas, we want to see those ideas actually coming out with something tangible, beneficial to the participants, to the participating countries, to Sadc as a whole.
Mr. Ziki, this is the 7th Sadc Industrialization Week, you know, coming out of a resolution passed in 2014 at the Sadak Summit hosted by Zimbabwe in Victoria Falls. 2015 ratified and developed into a Sadc industrialization strategy and a roadmap. Now, this being the 7th such event, perhaps you can take us through an analysis of what has been happening in terms of industrialization in Sadc for the past 7 years or so, because we know in 2020 it was not held because of the COVID pandemic, and then in 2023 it was cancelled. But what has been happening so far?
Thank you. I think for the purposes of gaining traction in terms of the appreciation of the importance of industrialization within the Sadc bloc, it is very critical that we realize that gaining traction somewhat took off in a slower pace in terms of the acceptance and appreciation of the defined parameters of what we may term industrialization of Sadc states by member states, with the over-reliance and the over-prominence in terms of highlighting the importance of foreign direct investment other than intra-regional trade. So to that effect, you would also want to see the impact and implication of the health pandemic that locked down the world. It also slowed it down. But you'd also want to, as I zone in and zero in on what my fellow panelist here, Mr. Zijo, is highlighting, that the commitments from the previous 6 industrialization weeks that have been held within the Sadc framework have not, to a large extent, borne the results and benefits that we would expect. But going forward, as we are in this 7th industrialization week of Sadc, and the assumption of the chair by Zimbabwe through His Excellency Comrade Didi Mnangagwa, it's something that we would want to continue in terms of proffering debate and instituting issues of dialogue to say what commitments, especially with the Zimbabwean 7th industrialization week that is currently ongoing, you'd want to say that it must come up with set out parameters that give out commitments in terms of investment by member states within the regional bloc, to say if Zimbabwe is hosting this Sadak Summit, the 44th ordinary Sadak Summit for government and heads of state, you'd want that commitment to say what are Sadak member states investing in a particular country and in which sectors, as well as within the broader setting of the Sadc member states.
Now, Mr. Zijo, what kind of industry are we talking about? When we say industrialization, we know that Sadc member states have different competencies, competitive advantages, and so forth within their individual economies. But what exactly, what is the end game? What kind of future are we talking about when we are saying Sadc must be industrialized?
Right. I think that leads us directly into a discussion of the industrialization strategy itself. What was it looking at? You see, it was looking at issues of transformation, and that transformation encompasses, you know, the concept of innovation. As you are aware, innovation is the theme, you know, for this year. And in our case, when we look at Zimbabwe, we can even look at the concept of industrialization. What do you call them? The innovation hubs. You know, when you bring those to the fore, you know, you are saying, as a region, what is it that we can contribute? Because for as long as we have not yet mastered the technology ourselves, it will be very difficult for us to compete in the wider world. So let us therefore look at how can we enhance innovation. So we want to see that coming out. It would have been a brilliant idea to actually have Sadc innovation hubs coming to display, at events such as this one, the products that have actually come from
Industrialization.
industrialization.
I want us to pick it up from there when we return from this break, Mr. Zijo and Mr. Zeki. This is Sadc Connect. Stay tuned. We'll be back. You're watching Sadc Connect. We are talking industrialization as well as how to uplift the entire Sadak region. Now, Mr. Zijo, you had mentioned the issue of embracing innovation. You said it would have been good to see companies, countries exhibiting at the Industrialization Week, also showcasing the innovations that they have made throughout the years. But perhaps you can add on to what exactly you're expecting in terms of the industrialization phase that we need to see.
Right. Some of in some of our discussions, often we want to look at manufacturing as probably the only industrial activity. But industrial activities, they extend beyond just manufacturing. Even mining itself, in production of electricity, water, and so on. All those are actually parts of industrialization of member states. But I would like to zero in on just on manufacturing and to point out one thing which I believe is lacking at the moment.
Okay.
And I will give an example of Zimbabwe, where the Central Statistics Offices, it was then, and it's now Zimstats, used to produce what we called Census of Production Statistics. This was a booklet which would show you the extent to which we are producing, if it's pulp and paper, if it's metal and metal products, if it's food, if it's beverages, and so on. We don't have that anymore. I actually did an exercise funded by the African Development Bank where was able to show that indeed most SADC states, except for South Africa, do not have this kind of industrial statistics. And I think it's a shortcoming. When we do measurement of what is it that we have achieved with industrialization within the region, we must be able to do so, not so much based on what ZIMRA and the other customs authorities are telling us, but in terms of what the statistics offices are showing us. Especially when you look at a country like Zimbabwe, which is informalized a lot, there's a lot of production which is taking place right now in informal settings.
Yeah.
But it's not being accounted for. So when we calculate GDP, at best we are just doing estimates. So I would like to see us, not just as Zimbabwe, but as a region, encompassing the idea of producing industrial statistics. It will help us when we now do monitoring, when we now say how much are we producing, which we can trade amongst ourselves, how much are we producing in formal sector, not just informal, formal sector.
Informal sector.
Because at the end, that is what shows us what is it that we are achieving in terms of the standard of living of people. Because ultimately, this is what, not just industrialization, but the whole concept of regional integration is aimed at raising the standards of living. Our 2030 vision is part of that.
Certainly. Certainly. Now, Mr. Zeki, this is what the ideal should be in terms of what Mr. Zijo has pronounced. Perhaps you can take us back and analyze the challenges that the region has been facing in terms of its industrialization thrust. What have been the major challenges in your view?
Thank you. I think Zimbabwe is a very perfect and very good example and benchmark of how to juxtapose the comparative scenarios that will then be at play in terms of ultimately having industry set up within a certain geographical area. And this is one of the major challenges that most African countries have been facing, especially within the Sadc regional bloc, to say that to what extent is ease of doing business and setting up shop within each member state. You would realize that of late, before the turn of the millennium, you would see that most challenges would be the time frame it takes to set up shop in any part of Sadc, and that has been a major setback. But we also go into institutional frameworks that have to do with production processes, that have to do with labor environments and statutes, policies that ultimately, at the end of the day, affect how we achieve or attain the aspired industrialization that would want as nations. You would also want to see that the global structure of doing business in terms of the trade balances or imbalances that have existed over quite a long period of time, where you say any company or industry or manufacturer that produces goods within Africa and Sadc for that matter is not competitive on the export market, on the international market, in terms of saying ultimately if industry is to be set up and it is to thrive, it has to have the ability to operate at a profit. That is, the goods and services that are produced in an industrialized state should be able to compete on a global scale. For instance, if we look at the Asian giant, their industrialization dictates that it can achieve and reach any part of the world in terms of the goods that they are manufacturing. But for African states and their economies and their industries, that has also been a challenge. So you'll see the 1, 2, 3 challenges that I've highlighted among the many that I may not exhaust at the moment. But you'd want to pay attention to the fact that these challenges are what these summits must address, are what these industrialization weeks prior to the summit must be addressing. So these are the tangible and the take-homes that would want to see being achieved when we move on to the 8th the Sadak Industrialization Week, to say the resolutions that were agreed on and passed and adopted by member states in Zimbabwe must be pushed on to realize the actual fruition of industrialization within SADC and Africa as a whole.
We'll be discussing these issues and more when we return for the third and final segment. Don't go away. Nice to have in the studio Mr. Farah Zijo, our economic analyst, as well as Mr. Elton Ziki, our political analyst, looking at what is taking place as we speak in Zimbabwe, the 7th Sadak Industrialization Week, a precursor, among other events, to the 44th Sadak Summit of Heads of State and Government that Zimbabwe will be hosting. And Mr. Zijo, President Emmerson Mnangagwa is expected to assume the chairmanship of the regional bloc at the 44th Sadak Summit of Heads of State and Government. What lessons can the region learn from the Zimbabwean experience in terms of how to grow economies, in terms of how to take the entirety of the Sadak bloc further?
When we look at the developments which have taken place over the last few years, we have seen Zimbabwe walk the talk when it comes to beneficiation of minerals. In particular, Zimbabwe has been blessed with new energy minerals, especially in the when we talk about lithium. And as you may be aware, actually Zimbabwe is recognized as a producer of note. And I believe that even in terms of the statistics, we are going to see an improvement in the not so distant future when all the processing plants have been set up, are producing at full capacity. But that is a direct result of Zimbabwe's policy, the policy shift which says, no, let us not export raw materials. Let us transform them into value-added products so that the country benefits more. This is a policy position which we find in the industrialization strategy and roadmap. So we have taken as Zimbabwe a step. And I believe that President Mnangagwa's chairmanship will give fresh impetus to this idea of transforming raw materials into value-added products. I believe that already we have seen the investment by Tsingshan at Dinson. And that is a manifestation of that policy, again, transforming the iron ore at Manize into steel. Right now, they have started producing pig iron, and in not so distant future, they will actually be producing steel billets and so on. So that is a direct result of the policy of transforming raw materials into
Finished products.
Okay, they may not be finished products per se, but they are value-added products. So we believe that Sadc country, other Sadc countries can actually take a leaf from this initiative which Zimbabwe has taken. And I believe that all countries, they are, they somehow they have some mineral of some sort that they can actually value add. But even if we look at agriculture, there are efforts currently underway to transform our tobacco. We produce a lot of tobacco. We're probably the largest producer in the region. But we have been selling it as raw tobacco. But we can see now efforts being made. We have new companies which have come up, which are now producing cigarettes and so on. I know that those who put the health benefits first, they will say, but you are, harming people and so on. But no, let's be realistic. This is a product which some people in the world still need, and we can still make money out of it. And for us, as a product of agriculture, transforming it into a value-added product actually gives us more as Zimbabweans. So this is the lesson that I believe other Sadc countries are seeing right now.
Mr. Ziki, on perhaps a slightly different note, is the political landscape prevailing in Sadc at the moment conducive for industrialization?
It is. I'll hasten to quickly answer in affirmative yes, that the political environment within Sadc is quite conducive for industrialization to take place, given the robust approach of Sadac's organ on peace, defense and security to respond to threats that may inhibit the realization of industrialization through interventions of peacekeeping initiatives within the troubled spots of Sadak. And you are aware the Cabo Delgado area, there is initiative and effort to keep that under some semblance of peacefulness. You are also aware that even prior to this age that we have, Sadak has also created interventions for the DRC to have peace. So what more would you have as an ingredient that will aid industrialization other than peace? And what more when you have pragmatic leaders that have visions to uplift the livelihoods of their citizens? So Zimbabwe is a beacon in terms of being the trailblazer and chart creator and charting new paths. You would see His Excellency has this mantra of getting Zimbabwe to a prosperous upper middle income economy by 2030. And that impetus can dovetail with what Sadak should aspire to have a Sadak that is prosperous and that will have reached an upper middle income economy, because Zimbabwe cannot be an upper middle income economy by 2030 and live outside, which is against the Sadak mantra.
President Mnangagwa talks of leaving no one and no place behind. And even so, the Sadak industrialization strategy in itself runs from 2015 up to 2030, coinciding with when Zimbabwe would have also realized its own vision, 2030. I believe it's a vision that will carry everyone within the region. Ladies and gentlemen, our dear viewers, we want to thank you for having been part of this discussion. I want to appreciate our guests, Mr. Farai Zijo, our economic analyst, as well as our political analyst, Mr. Elton Ziki, for joining us here on Sadak Connect. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming through.
Thank you, Justin.
And until next time, I'm Justin Maslatla. Enjoy the rest of your viewing.
Zimbabwe, a nation reborn, is extending its arms to the Southern African Development Community, SADC. As the country gears up for the Sadak Summit, the Zimbabwe Investment Development Agency, Zida, stands ready to guide the investment journey. Mr. Chinamo sheds light on promising sectors for regional investors.
When Zida was formed, the first thing that was established was the One-Stop Investment Services Center. So this is one place here at Zida where an investor can come and be assisted in registering their company, getting a tax clearance, and even opening a bank account. Should they want permits to engage in other activities, say mining or construction or other permits that a normal business would require, would be, all of that is facilitated from here. So as we evolved, as we wanted to make that journey for the investor much easier, what we then did starting last year was we then automated a lot of our processes to the extent now that an investor can start and finish the process of registering their investment in Zimbabwe and starting to invest in Zimbabwe. All of that can be done online on our online portal, our platform. The next step for us, I think, is just to make sure that even the permits that they require beyond Zida to actually start their projects or their businesses can also be done seamlessly like that.
Beyond streamlining processes, Mr. Chinamo shares Zida's efforts to attract investors.
I think a lot of investors consider the ease of doing business in a country very important. So we've reduced quite considerably the amount of time it takes an investor to set up a company. So if you want to register a company in Zimbabwe right now, with Zida, that can be done in less than 2 days. You will get all your paperwork done and then everything. We also aim that once an investor has got those founding documents sorted out, we aim to establish that investor within 90 days. By establishing, we mean to say that all the necessary paperwork for them to start their businesses should be complete within 90 days.
Mr. Chinamo elaborates on Zida's aftercare support.
Obviously, having investment opportunities is one thing. I mean, you could have the best resources, the best skills, and so forth. But as long as the environment itself is not conducive to an investor, a lot of investors may shy away from that. So one part of our mandate is to actually advocate for an easier or a more conducive business environment. So we do this through the Office of the President and Cabinet. I know recently they've actually set up a committee to improve the ease of doing business in Zimbabwe. So we are at the center of that. We coordinate all the government ministries, departments, and agencies in ensuring that what investors are telling us, where the obstacles are, those things are being worked on. And another thing that investors also want is consistency in the way that policies and laws in the country are administered and how that affects their businesses. So we also work very closely with all the key ministries and agencies of government to ensure that there is consistency in that. And when investors do actually stumble sometimes, or they don't quite understand things, or authorities descend on them in a way that perhaps they didn't understand, the first stop for them, we always say that they should come to us. With our help, we can navigate them through the whole process in the government infrastructures.
Investor confidence is key.
The Zeda Act is quite deliberate in that it gives a guarantee to an investor that your investment is safe in the country. I think a lot of investors want that. You know, if you deploy your capital in a certain country, you want those assurances. So the Zeda Act itself is an instrument that safeguards any investor against expropriation or other things that may affect that, I think their businesses. So the moment that an investor gets a Zeda investment license, that license by its virtue is guarantee and assurance from the government of Zimbabwe that they will honor whatever pledges they've given that investor.
With the Sadak Summit approaching, Mr. Shinamo delivers a message to potential investors.
The Sadak Summit is a big event, I think, on the calendar within this region. Heads of states are going to come to this country, and along with them also there'll be many other senior government officials from all over Sadak. We are also expecting a lot of business people who are looking for investment opportunities. And alongside that summit will be the Sadak Industrialization Week, which is being driven by the Zeda and the Ministry of Industry and Commerce. So that is something that always happens at the Sadak Summits. We believe that it's an opportunity for the region as a whole to showcase the opportunities for investors in our efforts to become an industrialized region. So we went a step further, and as much as that is about industrialization and speaking directly to people in the industry already, and those who want to expand or integrate as a region to bring better efficiencies and so forth. We are hosting a day before the start of that Industrialization Week an investment summit. So we've partnered with our fellow investment promotion agencies in the region to host this one-day event. It will be graced by Vice President Chiwenga as our guest of honor. And we're expecting many notable speakers internationally and locally who will speak about the opportunities that we believe exist within the region if we work together as a region. Because one thing that you will realize is that as Southern Africa, we are on a global scale, population-wise, scale-wise, size-wise, we are not that big. We are even smaller if we consider ourselves as single countries. But we believe that with the connectivities that we can achieve, with the resources that we have, and the strengths that we each possess in our own unique way, if that can be leveraged to bring the region together, we can achieve much, much more. I think a lot of the things that we speak about, the value chains that we speak about, the sort of raw materials or the ability to process those raw materials into value-added products, we believe that some of those things can be achieved by a single country. But if we consider it on a regional scale, it is possible that we can do some of the big things that might seem impossible for one country to achieve. So that is what we're looking forward to, and we are hoping that our investment summit will highlight and showcase other examples where we believe that opportunities exist. Perhaps we can only speak, obviously, from a Zimbabwean point of view, where these opportunities are in Zimbabwe, but the benefit and the leveraging of other skills and resources from our neighbors can actually make these opportunities into something much, much bigger for the entire region.
That there, of course, being some of the developments that took place with regards to programming during the Sadak Summit, and we'll be sharing with you a few of those during the course of our programming today. We'll now be crossing over live to the Robert Gabriel Mugabe International Airport, where we're joined by Oline and Butler. I will be able to give us the rundown on the proceedings taking place thus far. Who have arrived in the country thus far for the 44th Sadc Summit. A very clear position being made with regards to the progress taking place. Let's listen in to Butler and Oline.